Welcome, fellow KISS fans. Welcome to It's All For You Demons, celebrating the fun of being a KISS fan. And as the shirt describes today, going to be celebrating the 80s. A few weeks ago, we talked magazines, and I mentioned in that video that there's so much emphasis put on 70s magazines because, of course, that was the heyday of the band, and, you know, there was just a plethora of magazines out there to be had. And I think sometimes the 80s into the 90s are overlooked. Of course, when the reunion tour hit, magazines boomed once again. But the 80s and 90s, my era of collecting those magazines, going to the grocery store when I couldn't even drive, Dan Thompson would take us in the Camaro. That era, I think, is overlooked. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. Finally nailing down a top 5, what we consider to be the greatest top 5 non-makeup magazines of the 80s. 1983 into the 90s. We're going to go a little bit into the 90s, but we're going to stop reunion. So 1983, 1995. The top 5 greatest non-makeup KISS magazines. So tonight, before we get into the top 5 magazines of the 1980s, you're probably wondering why there's a James Bond record sitting here, and it's because tonight our fellow friend, fellow KISS fan, fellow guitarist Thom Dust, who covered Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon so beautifully, goosebumps 100%. Link below in the description. You have to listen to this. I love this song anyway because I love James Bond movies, but his cover is mesmerizing. And Thom is our Dogs of It's All For You Demon tonight. Thom wrote to us and said, in a nod of pure pop culture love, here are some picks for your consideration, as Rod Serling would say, my dog, Molly. And here is Thom Dust's dog, the Dog of Thunder, Molly. First off, this decision-making process for this video was really hard. I tried to make this top 5 list based on what's actually the best and remove my opinion. So, to start off, we're gonna have 3 contenders for an honorable mention. And honorable mention number 3 is going to be the RIP photo special from 1990. And the reason this is an honorable mention is you put yourself in a 1990 world, pre-internet, a photo special like this is special because these are pictures you don't or you didn't normally see back then. In case in point, this great photo from the Alive 2 era of Gene poolside hiding behind that album. Now in 1990, unless you were privy to that photo, you didn't see this every day. Today, internet world, this pops up all over the place. But back then, seeing this kind of stuff was brand new. Honorable mention number 2, the KISS Alive 1990 Hot in the Shade Tour magazine. Not going to go too into this, but this was fun because, again, pre-internet world, you learned a lot about a tour through magazines like this. Today, you know everything from the costumes to the set list to the explosions before you even go to a show. And these were kind of a cool way to hype you up before the show or buy afterwards and celebrate the memory of that show. Cool moment here shows all the stage commands for the special effects. With no set list FM, this was your only chance to see that set list. And this one actually came with a pretty badass poster from 1981. Those elder outfits. I'm not much into the 90s posters like celebrating makeup days, but this one is pretty badass. Honorable mention number 1, Hit Parader from August 1992, Gene and Paul on the cover. This is kind of our Gene and Paul celebration moments. This magazine came with like this cool booklet on the front with like a history of the band and some, you know, old history there before heading in to Revenge. And when Revenge came out, this was huge. And again, no internet. You had to run to, in our case, Food Barn, grocery store, magazine rack to get this kind of glory. And this one's cool. Gene and Paul on the cover. You gotta love that. Love that Kiss logo there in the middle. But man, when you open this up, if you were not hot-faced for Revenge before, now with a double page ad, you were definitely hot-faced for Revenge. So cool. The new album available everywhere. This would be perfect to hang on your wall. And this magazine is our number 1 honorable mention, which ties in to number 5 on our list. Rip magazine from June 1990, when Gene and Paul put the makeup back on. Granted, I was brand new into being a fan of this band, but I have to say, if you were ever a fan of this band, this one was big for you. Danny was super excited for this because it was the first time the band was ever wearing makeup from his childhood, and this celebrated the Rise to It video. This one was definitely a jaw-dropping moment at Food Barn in the grocery store, because I don't think we knew this magazine was coming out, and when we saw it, it was like jaw on the floor, gotta buy this, put together your lawn mowing money, we have a new Kiss mag. And so number 5, the June 1990, Gene and Paul once again in makeup. And number 4 on our list, Rock Scene Spotlights, July 1990, Kiss the Videos. Man, there were some good magazines coming out in the 90s. And to me, this magazine is so important in the 80s because that VHS movement of those rock documentary, uncensored, exposed type movies. And this is one of those magazines, when I look at this magazine, I'm immediately taken back to my summer after my sophomore year, and I can still see every picture in this magazine, still know every description of every video. Starts off with the Elder, goes into Creatures, Lick It Up, Animalize, and then into Asylum, and it just keeps going, and it is nothing but videos, descriptions of the song, the Alive fan club, the Alive Supply Depot. Check out those posters, check out those prices, and there are the home videos. And Ends, which in 1990, Danny and I were nerds and we loved it, ends with the glory of Phantom of the Park. Once again, pre-internet, seeing photos like this. You know, at the time back then, we didn't have the Phantom magazine, so we didn't know stuff like this existed. 1990, this stuff was a godsend, and this magazine still holds a very special place in my heart. Number 3 on the list, the Billboard magazine from January 1989, celebrating Kiss, celebrating smashes, thrashes, and hits. And this thing is basically just like a fluff piece to Kiss and smashes. I'm sure the record company paid for this, but this thing is great, and really, you don't see this pop up a lot. This was one of those magazines. I mean, I remember being a kid in 1989. I don't think I ever purchased one Billboard magazine, but this one, if I would have seen this in Walden Books, I definitely would have bought it. And it's kind of fun because the whole thing is nothing but ads to Gene and Paul and Kiss and Ace and Peter, and thanking them for 15 years of rock and roll. Cool little fold out in the beginning. Little Smashes ad there. And you always have to point out these. I love these. I love discography pages. My goodness, these were my go-to checklist for that back catalog of CDs, and I love this album. And number 3 on our list, we talked about a little bit last week, or a couple weeks ago, is the Exposed magazine. And Exposed was a huge moment in the band's history, because if you think about it, people like Danny, who grew up in the 70s liking Kiss, had never really seen makeup stuff a lot. And Exposed gave them that chance. And I think Exposed brought a lot of that historic makeup era back to kids of the 70s and early 80s. And then people like me, just getting into the band, it was like a gateway drug. in this magazine celebrates that VHS perfectly. This is a must-have of 80s magazines. So this one was definitely destined to be high on the list. And number 2, The Exposed Magazine. Summer fun done right. Now this is why this top 5 list hurt my heart so bad, because number 1, I automatically was thinking, oh, it's the Might and Magic of Kiss. It's my very first Kiss magazine, the one that did it all for me, my library, my cliff notes, my everything. Sadly, Might and Magic, you didn't make this number 1 list. You do make number 1 in my heart. It goes to the Superstar Facts and Pics magazine from 1986. And the funny thing about this is my buddy FL Dawg, he sent me this magazine and said this was his everything in high school, much like that was my everything in high school. So I said, I'll definitely have to check it out, and I did, and it's actually better than the Might and Magic, the one that was my everything in high school, because this, I feel, reflects both the past and the present better. But whereas this was a lot of historical information and current day interviews, whereas this magazine seems to be heavy on pictures from the present and pictures from the past. And boom, right off the start, we're into the Paul Stanley era. And this is where this magazine steals it, because you get into these cool makeup photos that you do not get in the Might and Magic. Super cool pictures from the history of the band. Peter, Ace, cool current day centerfold, Mark St. John, Vinny, the ladies of Kiss, and then the Asylum tour. Cool Kiss discography, and then the best, My Heart. This was me, 1985. 1986 into 87, Brandon Funk and I cut the top of our Trapper Keepers, and we would trade Motley Crue photos in our Trapper Keeper. I'm sure this was probably one of them at one time. Theater was such a big thing for me. It's icing on the cake for this one. Number 1, must-have magazine, Superstar Facts and Pics, Kiss, and the other Wild Men of Metal. Might and Magic, You Will Never Leave My Heart, I Love Ya, but you just didn't make this list. This list is magazines that are the best of the 80s era. And this one, brand new one to me. Never seen it before, 2023, and I'm loving it. You learn something new every day. Thank you for hanging with us tonight and waxing a little rock and roll nostalgia about the top 5 80s magazines, the best of the bunch. Speaking of best of the bunch, here is little Pee-wee, ready to go to bed. We're filming late tonight, girly. I know. Be good to your babies. Spay, neuter, microchip. Take care. Be safe. This one has already gone to bed. We will talk to you soon.